Hey, what's up? I'm back. The world has been crazy lately, and like a lot of other people, I've been busy. But it's also Halloween, and despite my personal distaste for Halloween, a tacky holiday for normies to try out being goth for one day out of the year, it's also a holiday dedicated to a lot of my favorite things, like vampires. And constantly seeing them everywhere I look for the past few weeks has gotten me thinking about the Nameless King again, and my old theory about the classic Romanian vampiric folklore that seems to have inspired Miyazaki. If you read a lot of nonfiction analyses of vampire myth and folklore, you'll notice very quickly that a lot of people will stretch the definition of vampire as far as they need to claim that stories from all around the world are early versions of vampire myths. Others have argued that this tendency is, intentionally or not, an act of whitewashing non-European cultures because the vampire is really a distinctly Eastern European monster. I mean, there's the Jiangxi, commonly called the Chinese vampires, despite being more similar to zombies, and I've even seen the claim that the West African spirits that preceded the modern concept of zombies were an early form of vampire folklore because there were myths of spirits being separated from a person's body by a sorcerer who then commands the spirit to drain the life force from other people. You can see the similarities there, obviously, but yeah, it feels like a stretch to call that a vampire. I wouldn't be surprised if some people looked at my claim here and accused me of doing a similar thing, stretching the definition of vampire to fit in a peripherally related myth. But I'm going to push back on that and point out that this particular folkloric monster is at least one of the inspirations behind Dracula, the most iconic vamp novel and character which completely, almost single-handedly, shaped our collective idea of vampires. I'm talking, of course, about the solomonarii. The solomonarii come from Romanian folklore, and unfortunately there are no texts we can refer back to see the original versions of the stories, because they were passed down orally.
Solomonarii.
The earliest written accounts I know of about them come from German researchers who interviewed Romanians about their local folklore, and that's where the German word, the one that's on screen right now, however you say that word, that's where that one comes from, and that's the term that we see in Dracula. The novel doesn't say much about the solomonarii, just that Drac is one of them. So let's look at the article Bram Stoker reportedly took extensive notes on while writing Dracula. According to Emily Gerard, the solomonarii attended their devilish school deep in the heart of the mountains, where they learned the secrets of nature, the language of animals, and all imaginable magic spells and charms. They became druids, basically, and the devil himself was the archdruid instructing them. After their training is complete at the end of 9, or by some accounts 7 years of study, 9 of the 10 pupils leave to, well, basically act as druids in all the ways you'd expect. The folklore has some vague nonsense about maintaining balance and stuff like that. But the 10th member of the solomonarii, that one stays behind with the devil and becomes the weather maker, creating lightning bolts and commanding storms while riding a dragon. Sound familiar? There are a few things here to point out besides the obvious, but I just want to go back to that Transylvanian Superstitions article real quick to point out my favorite part. The claim that you can prevent headaches by hitting yourself in the head with a piece of iron. Next time someone tells me to respect my elders or listen to ancient wisdom, I'll just crack them in the head with an iron rod and let them know that I'm protecting them from headaches, according to the wisdom of my ancestors. Anyway, the first thing I want to point out about the solomonarii folklore is the fact that the school they attend to learn sorcery is sometimes referred to as the School of the Dragon. And of course, the one sorcery school that's constantly referenced all throughout the Dark Souls trilogy is the Dragon School of Vinheim. This could be a coincidence, sure, both sorcery and dragons are ubiquitous in fantasy stories, but it feels a bit too coincidental to me. Possibly a coincidence, but I lean toward thinking it's probably an intentional reference. And speaking of the School of the Dragon, where was it said to be in the original Romanian folklore? Somewhere in the heart of the mountains, which again fits perfectly with Dark Souls. Another thing to point out from that original folklore is that mountain range apparently holds an impossibly deep lake where the dragon sleeps, and the locals warned people not to throw stones into lakes because doing that could wake the dragon, causing a thunderstorm.
You don't want to wake the dragon, do you?
No.
Apparently people had died from being struck by lightning multiple times in this region. but that reminds me of the multiple notes in Archdragon Peak warning you not to ring the bell.
Thank you. To travel the path of the dragon, do not ring the great bell. Nothing will remain once the bell has tolled. Why do you guys say stuff like that, man? So negative.
And of course, if you do ring the bell, you'll wake the dragon and get killed by lightning. And this command of the storms is a prominent ability of Dracula's, highlighted multiple times in the novel as well as many of its adaptations.
Above was an impenetrable thundercloud outstretched beyond the hills.
Gemelo, augo, tuldom tromi. Gimiskego epipetero, abtul gverventos.
I should also mention that in the novel, Dracula is explicitly said to have all of the other powers classically attributed to the solomonarii, like talking to animals, but that stuff doesn't come up as much. But here's the important part. It's not explicitly stated, but is arguably implied and is widely accepted that within the lore of the original novel, Dracula initially becomes a vampire by making that pact with the devil and attending the dragon school. This would make the term solomonar interchangeable with vampire, and that implication is made explicit in Nosferatu.
Ăsta a fost vrăjitor întunecat la viața lui.
A black enchanter he was in life. Solomonar.
Satana i-a ținut sufletul, ca trupul lui încă să mai
The devil preserved his soul,
blasfemii.
that his corpse may walk again in blasphemy.
So, the most iconic vampire of all time became what we now call a vampire due to being one of the solomonarii, who each presumably became similarly undead due to their pact with the devil. And the 10th of their number seems to be the figure that inspired the Nameless King. But the Nameless King isn't undead, right? Well, no, yes. It's debated whether the Nameless King is undead in the Dark Souls sense of the word, and I'm not going to weigh in on that because the fact is, and you might not like to hear this, Dark Souls lore makes no sense, and the Dark Souls writers themselves don't seem to know what an undead is within their own lore. The games constantly contradict themselves on that topic, so arguing about whether the Nameless King is one is pointless. But he does seem to be undead in the broader, general sense of the word. I might make a video about all the irreconcilable inconsistencies and direct contradictions in Dark Souls lore too, but that's another topic. For now, I just want to focus on the fact that the Nameless King is a living, desiccated corpse who sided with the primary enemy of the gods of Anor Londo and now resides deep in a secluded mountain fortress and rides a dragon while commanding storms and throwing lightning. In other words, Gwyn's firstborn is...
Solomonar.
Yeah, that. And for the record, I love that Robert Eggers went so hard getting the folklore right for that movie, even correcting Bram Stoker's mistake of copying Emily Gerard's made-up German word. Eggers went back to the original Romanian and even had Dacian, a dead language, partially reconstructed for Orlok to speak that language throughout the movie. That's cool as hell. And that famous shot of the castle the first time we see it? I can't prove it, but I would guess that shot was inspired by this actual 19th century Romanian journal. And if you still don't believe me that the Nameless King is a vampire, I'll refer you to my final piece of evidence, the piece of music we've been listening to this entire time. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you already know what it is, but in case you don't, that's the Nameless King's theme. And it is the most vampiric melody ever recorded. If you try to tell me that's not a vampire's theme song, you're lying. And by the way, as a side note, I was watching the Rockland Graves video on Nosferatu, and this caught my attention.
Oh, also, there's a line in the soundtrack that's straight out of Bloodborne. I don't know if that was an intentional homage or something that just came about because these two worlds have some similarities in tone, but that's the Bloodborne music, my dude.
Not directly related to anything I was talking about here, I just thought that was an interesting parallel. And yes, as you've probably guessed, the main reason I'm making this video is this is my shit. I love a dark enchanter. I love a vile necromancer. A wicked practitioner of the dark arts. These are some of my favorite characters and tropes. Euron Greyjoy and Papa Midnight and the Guild Eldritch from The Last God. This is one of my favorite character archetypes, and thinking about the Nameless King in that sort of way just makes the character that much cooler to me. This is the perfect way to bring vampire lore into a medieval high fantasy setting. And if you're inclined to get hung up on the Dark Souls terminology of sorceries versus miracles, with the two representing distinctly different types of magic and the Nameless King clearly being in the latter camp, keep in mind that distinction does not exist in the folklore or classic Gothic literature that we're talking about. That's specifically Dark Souls terminology used to codify game mechanics. In a different setting, the Nameless King would absolutely be labeled as a sorcerer. And that's cool as hell. And knowing the connections to the real-world Romanian folklore makes it that much cooler. Hopefully you agree. And to clarify before I wrap this video up, I don't think the Nameless King has fangs and drinks blood and sleeps in a coffin filled with Transylvanian dirt or anything like that. I just think the lore that inspired Bram Stoker in creating Dracula also inspired Miyazaki creating the Nameless King. And maybe we can find some hints for understanding the character better by knowing the inspiration. Like considering how Dracula became an immortal undead by allying with the devil, and the Nameless King was stripped of godhood due to allying with the dragons and now seems to be undead. I think there's something there. Especially considering the fact that the dragon the Nameless King befriended is a storm drake, and he's called the King of the Storm while on that dragon. And after killing them, the player can be infused with the power of a tornado or something like that. So while the Nameless King would have had lightning powers either way, it was by allying with the dragons that he became the King of the Storms. Just like the 10th Solomonar, the Weathermaker, who, according to the lore of Dracula, would have continued to live after death through a pact with the devil. Anyway, sorry for the late Halloween post. I stupidly started making this video a week ago thinking, hey, Halloween's in a few days, I should put together a video for that, and then tried to script, record, and edit everything within 3 days. It took longer than that. Whoops. Anyway, thanks for watching.